What the Pel is up, everybody? This is Pelicans Plus with Elliot Clough at Elliot Clough on Twitter. Make sure you go follow us there. Also, you're watching on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Make sure you subscribe or follow depending on where you're listening. Drop a comment, leave a like. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts right now, you leave a like. Sorry about that. But anyway, today, as you could see on the description, we are talking a little bit about Kyle Lowry and those rumors that he may be headed to New Orleans, at least that the Pelicans are interested and may want him. The buzz is growing, I believe, is the quote from Marc Stein, who is apparently close to the situation. He said, or there you go. He reported today that there is, quote, rising buzz that the Pelicans plan to enter the race for Kyle Lowry. And now a lot of people are interested, including myself. I'm a big Kyle Lowry fan for a lot of reasons. His personality, the way he plays the game of basketball, obviously, and the fact that he's been so loyal to Toronto since being there. I don't know if he was traded from Houston or if he signed as a free agent, but he went from the Grizzlies to Houston to Toronto, and he's been incredibly loyal there. He's stuck it out, even with the DeMar being traded and Kawhi Leonard showing up and them going to win a championship. Obviously, he built a relationship with Kawhi as much as you can do that, I suppose, and they went on to win that championship. But there's a lot of reasons to be interested in a Kyle Lowry or to think that he can fit well in New Orleans, and I'm personally in both camps right now. I'm a big fan of Lowry, and I think he can do a lot for this franchise. Obviously, there's the people who are a little bit nervous given the fact that, well, he was hurt this last year. They did ultimately hold him out for probably more significant time than he needed to be held out because they wanted to improve their lottery odds. And look what they got. They got that number 4 pick. Probably going to get Jalen Suggs. But also, there's somebody responded to my tweet and said that this is similar to last year where the Pels went out and got Eric Bledsoe, but it's not, because Kyle Lowry's good. So I disagree there. We'll get into all that. But first, what I want to talk about is what he would bring to the Pelicans in New Orleans, then what the Pelicans would do to make it happen, to bring him to New Orleans, to, outbid those opposing teams like Philadelphia 76ers, like the Miami Heat, and possibly like the Toronto Raptors, who may want to keep him in town up there as, a continued feel-good story that he has been, even though the Raptors have begun to struggle recently. Pascal Siakam is apparently not what he used to be, and I think they progressively got somewhat better, especially after the acquisition of Gary Trent Jr., who I like a lot. He will actually be a free agent this offseason, and we'll talk a little bit more about him as we go on as well. But first off, I want to address that Eric Bledsoe was supposed to be this veteran leader, this guy coming in and changing the culture and stuff like that. I mean, I just said it. The difference is that Kyle Lowry is actually good. Like Bled hasn't been really consistent at being a top player on any team he's been on since his days in Phoenix. Like, he was traded. Ultimately, he went to Milwaukee. And I mean, I lived in Wisconsin for a little while. One of my friends said the reason Bled was traded is because he can't shoot. And he was on those defensive teams, apparently, because the all defensive teams, NBA, league-wide, the awards that they hand out in terms of those teams, because the rest of the defense was good. They had Giannis, they had Chris Middleton, they had Brook Lopez. They were good from top to bottom. And those teams are so much more inclined to choose based on the success of the individual teams that they're on, as opposed to the individual defenders, i.e. why Jrue Holiday wasn't selected a couple years, because he's not a team defender, whatever. Anyway, Kyle Lowry is not there should be no similar line of thinking in regards to what Eric Bledsoe brought this year to New Orleans and what he's been for his career, what he brought to Milwaukee, and Kyle Lowry. They're not the same person. You can see that in how they interact with the media, their teammates, their love and desire for the game of basketball, and, the eye test of just watching the sport. Because, Kyle Lowry's good and Eric Bledsoe is not. Anyway, also to add to that, Kyle Lowry shot 39.6% from three this year, and he's been above, let's see here, 34%, basically 35% every year since 2015, 2016. Pretty consistently up towards 40%, only above 40% once, but he's been up and close to that. And those of you who are watching, tell me so far. It can be based on anything I've said. You can drop a comment anywhere you're at and it'll pop up and I can share it on the screen and I'll reference it here while we're talking about this as well. So please go ahead and do that. Feel more than welcome to do that. So anyway, that 39.6% and the consistency around 40% from three should be enough to say, that would probably be a good thing for New Orleans. And the thing about that too, and not just his play, but Lowry is like super likable. How can you not like this guy? You can bring him in. He's been a leader for that championship team that went to that won it all for Toronto. Kawhi Leonard wasn't the leader. I mean, maybe you could pawn off some of that to Marc Gasol as well, who came in, I believe, halfway through the season. He was traded for Jonas Valanciunas and probably a few other pieces, but Kyle, he's the difference between that idea of leadership between him and Eric Bledsoe or anybody else that you would bring in at the guard position that the Pelicans are kind of in dire need of is that Kyle has actually been a leader before. This isn't a thing that's in theory. You know, going out and getting Eric Bledsoe, he's a quiet type. He doesn't really like, I mean, from what's easy to gather by watching him, it's not something that he necessarily enjoys talking to the media. It's not like he goes up there and is, you know, chill and relaxed like a Kyle Lowry, or it just doesn't appear for him to be easily, he just doesn't fit into social situations. Well, there's no other way to put it. I'm sorry for framing it like that. But Kyle Lowry, you see him on camera, you see him talking to reporters, you see him talking to his teammates. I mean, we know that clip with him next to DeMar DeRozan where they were both on the big screen and Kyle goes, like, I'm so excited to be on there. And I love that Kyle Lowry has that personality, and that makes it easier for him to lead these young guys because they've seen him be that. They've seen him lead these teams to championships. It's not like Eric Bledsoe or Steven Adams come in and they really haven't been leaders before, and then they just are expected to be leaders because they're veterans with a bunch of young guys. It's not the same thing because Kyle Lowry has led other veterans. He's led teams in the holistic point of view, and then also he can bring that to New Orleans. It's not just in theory. It's been put into practice. And I love that about Lowry. He's my guy for a lot of reasons, and that's a very, very big one. He's built those relationships with DeMar, with other teammates, with Kawhi after DeMar was traded. And his willingness to be a leader in a veteran role, too. And this team needs a leader in a lot of different ways. B.I., Zion, hopefully they'll step into some sort of role like that. But Kyle Lowry can be the older voice up top that just kind of oversees everything. And I like this comment by Joe X187. We'll get to yours as well, LJ. Before Kawhi got to wrong form of there, but that's okay. It's THERE just for future reference, Joe. But that is A-okay. We'll roll right past it. Before Kawhi got to Toronto, they had multiple 50-win seasons. Granted, it was in the East. The East wasn't that great at that point in time, but it's still the NBA. Great point, Joe. And Kyle was a huge part of that. There we go. All right, we're good, Joe. Anyway, in continuing to talk about that, I mean, Derek Favors, the same thing. It was just in theory that he would be a leader coming to New Orleans. But in all reality, he hadn't done that before. And Kyle Lowry can step into that situation and be readily good to go there. And on top of having Willie Green be a first-year head coach and hoping that he'll be able to instill a lot of new things and good values and be a rookie head coach and hoping that you can get more of a veteran guy as a lead assistant. If you can bring in a veteran like a Kyle Lowry to help meld things and help push things forward, that is awesome. awesome. I love that pairing, and I think they could do a lot of really, really good things together. And here's the thing that also adds a lot of value for me to Kyle Lowry is, as Joe mentioned, multiple 50-win seasons before Kawhi Leonard got to Toronto. His record in the playoffs isn't fantastic, but you're not going to really find anybody that's got an incredible playoff record unless, you segment years or it's LeBron James or whatever. Kyle Lowry, 51-46, almost 100 playoff games under his belt. They had that stretch where it was LeBronto, right? He just owned those teams. And ultimately, Masai Ujiri made the move to go get Kawhi. And it was the correct move. And they ended up winning the title, obviously. And the thing about Kyle is that not only, like I said, he's been a leader for these veteran teams, for these teams with a bunch of older guys, but he's also led them when they won a championship. He's been to the playoffs so much, and this team hasn't. They haven't even been to the play-in. They don't know what this is like. Steven Adams does. Eric Bledsoe does, but we know that the value they've brought in the regular season isn't enough to get them to the playoffs. Zion Williamson is used to this physicality, but is it going to be ramped up even more in the playoffs? Brandon Ingram's a twig. We know that the defense isn't there. Kyle Lowry's scrappy defensively. Is he great on defense, especially now that he is 36, which we'll be talking about in a moment here, defensive_mind. Thank you for pointing that out. What do you pay a 36-year-old? But the thing here is that he's got the IQ. He's been at the forefront of a defense before, and he consistently brings that effort, unlike what we saw from Eric Bledsoe, who clearly didn't want to be in New Orleans. Even though he is a 36-year-old, he does give it what he has on that end of the floor. And, you think about all the things that Bled was supposed to be, that Steven Adams was supposed to be this last year, and they may very well have been it. I mean, we saw the growth of Jackson Hayes, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Kira Lewis started to lose his legs a little bit as the season progressed, but he's a rookie. I mean, you can see that coming. He was 19, right? So Kyle can be a mentor for Nickeil Alexander-Walker, for Kira Lewis. And if there's anybody that I would really want to be a mentor for a Kira Lewis, Kyle Lowry is probably that guy, not only because of his emotional intelligence and leadership, but because of his play. And we've seen in his career that 3-point percentage, his field goal percentage, continue to just go up and up and up and up. When Kyle Lowry came into the league, he was shooting 25.7% the first year he played in 82 games for the Memphis Grizzlies. I guess it was, let's see here. Yes, 82 games for the Memphis Grizzlies in 2007, 2008. And then come, about, let's see here, like 5 years later, he's consistently up close to 37.5%. That's a big jump. That is a big, big jump. Thank you for the comment, Donald Woods Jr. I like the sunglasses on your YouTube profile pic. And as we continue here, talking a little bit more about Kyle Lowry, his mentorship of Kira would be really big. And as I talk about that jump shot, Kyra's got the tools, he's got the mechanics, but it didn't quite fall to the degree that would have been immensely effective this year, right? It would have been great for him to continue to play and continue to get more comfortable. But to have somebody of the caliber of Kyle Lowry around is that much more influential. At least I'd like to think it would be that much more influential for a guy like Kira Lewis, who's watched him win a championship, who's watched him be scrappy defensively and improve in terms of his jump shot. And that's something that he can instill with Kira. And we've seen Na getting the work in this offseason. The work in. Bam. You hit it, man. I love it. And Na wants to be successful. He wants to win with this team. He's wearing the Pelicans gear when he's working out, which is awesome. You love to see that. And also, Kyle Lowry's played with some pretty damn good bigs in his career. I mean, Jonas Valanciunas has gotten quite a bit better in Memphis. He looks to be a bit of a spacing big now. He threw his elbows around. He's going to get boards. Kyle Lowry played with Marc Gasol, who transitioned from being a strictly under the basket kind of big to shooting threes. And now we see Jackson Hayes starting to expand his game and do that not, kind of a consistent basis now. Kind of a consistent basis, at least towards the end of the season when he had a little bit more freedom. And we talked about this benefit of, Charles Lee, seeing what, and even though he's not going to be the next head coach of the New Orleans Pelicans, it's seeing what Bud did with Milwaukee and Giannis and Chris and combining the two. And you could kind of say the same thing about Kyle Lowry, what he saw in terms of how Marc Gasol grew, right? That's awesome. We want to continue to bring in veterans who've seen things like that, have the tangible experience right in front of them, rather than just in theory, like Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams. And let's see. I think that was all I had to mention, other than one more is being that he saw what Kawhi Leonard did in terms of being a two-way player on the basketball court. That's so huge. And Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson need that. They need it because the growth isn't at the degree that we need it to be, that New Orleans needs it to be. Have they continued to improve? Yes, they have. They've gotten significantly better. At least Zion has. Brandon Ingram, it was awful this last season. Awful. And I think his honestly, what we've seen, his better defensive days were in Los Angeles because, well, he didn't have to focus so much on the offensive end. And I'd like to think that it wasn't because of his relationship with Stan Van Gundy that he didn't really try defensively, but who knows? And we're hoping that that'll improve and be better on that end of the floor this coming year. And adding a guy like Kyle Lowry, who's seen Kawhi Leonard do it, it doesn't hurt. That's all I'm saying. Now, as to how the Pelicans make that happen, that is the hard part. Would that move the Pels into the luxury tax? It depends on a few things, LJ, and a great question. In terms of the cap, the hard cap, all of that, I'm going to be honest with you, and I've said this a few times, I'm not a capologist. I am not great at keeping track of that type of stuff, but what I can tell you is it will be really incredibly difficult for the Pelicans to go out and get Kyle Lowry in free agency because of where they're at in the cap right now. And the bidding war is probably going to push up the price of Lowry. It's going to depend on how much New Orleans wants to pay him, how much Philly wants to pay him, and how much Miami wants to pay him along with Toronto. Because this last year, I believe he made $30 million in Toronto. I'll look that up. But the payday is going to be a very large part of it between these four teams that may well bid for him. Yeah, he made exactly $30 million this season in Toronto. So pushing for him there would be a big move, and it would be tough to make in free agency. Now, in terms of a sign and trade, that's where it becomes more likely. And I've seen some thoughts around on the interwebs about how the Pels get that done. And there's a question that a lot of people have been asking. And one is, can you do a double sign and trade? Can you do Lonzo for Kyle Lowry? That might be difficult in terms of money as well. And speaking of money, defensive_mind, this is a great question right here. For those of you who are watching right now, it's a great question. And in terms of paying him, I think the way you pay and give up value for Kyle Lowry is via sign and trade, because paying out of pocket in free agency is just a lot less likely in my mind's eye, unless you can get off Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe's contract one way or another and be able to make the money work by sending the majority of it elsewhere. That's the only way I really see the free agency thing happening, unless he wants to take a discount to come to New Orleans, which we know that free agents probably not going to do that. Small market teams that are not going to compete for a title, generally, you're not going to get a discount. And again, you got it right here. If you want Kyle Lowry, you got to pay one way or another. And this is about winning now. And with the pressure that's been put on the organization because of Zion and because of Brandon Ingram there, Kyle Lowry would be a win now move. And Exhibit A right there is Donald Woods Jr. saying, if you want Kyle Lowry, you got to pay. And you got to be aggressive if you're the Pelicans. Exactly. And I know a lot of people, the idea of signing a 36-year-old makes some people nervous. And if you do a sign and trade, it has to be at least 3 years, which would also make me nervous given that he's 35 now. I think will be 36. And that, I mean, you don't want a 39-year-old on your payroll. Willie Green's 39 right now, and he's being hired to be the next head coach. So that is a bit of a dicey situation in terms of the sign-in trade as well. It just comes down to, what do you think you can get that would be better than Kyle Lowry for the immediate and the long term, would make Zion want to stay, would keep Brandon Ingram happy, would make the Pelicans win? You got to start winning. You can't have this 31 and 41 season again. They just can't continue to pile up. That's not going to make Zion want to stick around. It's just not. He wants to win, and he wants to win as soon as possible. And if you can make that happen quick, then you do it. And if it's Kyle Lowry, if you believe he can do that, if you believe he can stay healthy, then you go out and do it. Personally, with the price of Colin Sexton, he might be my choice over a Kyle Lowry. But if you want to learn more about Colin Sexton, you gotta look back and on our last podcast, which was really, really good. I enjoyed it. I know it's gotten a lot of views and a lot of listens so far. So now, what do you give up in terms of capital in a trade? Are you gonna, because free agency, it's just, in my mind, it's just not likely. And I don't think anybody else that I've seen has said that they believe it's going to happen in a way, by way of free agency. I just doubt it. I really do. If it happens, great. And they're, under the luxury tax, awesome. It's just going to be difficult with Adams and Bledsoe on the books. But in terms of a sign-in trade, drop your ideas. Those of you who are listening, watching, drop your ideas in the comments, and we'll talk about if it's good enough to do, good enough to put forward in a trade to the Raptors. And the thing and the place that's easy to go to is, Adams and Bledsoe, right? Done deal. Well, here's the thing, is that Steven Adams is probably he's going to be he would be in a sign and trade for Kyle Lowry if it happens. I have an educated guess that it would be him, because the Raptors, 29th in defensive rebounding this year, 29th, almost second to last in the entire league. They could use a guy like Steven Adams. They could use a guy who's big and strong and can set picks out there and stuff like that. And if they hold on to Gary Trent Jr. and he can, set pin down screens, yeah, he'd be a good asset for them. But Bled would be a difficult one to give up because, well, the Raptors aren't interested, at least according to Matt Moore from the Action Sports Network. Stan, you mean? Also, he's a rebounder, so that they would want him. But that's a big need for them. They're 29th in the NBA in defensive rebounding, so they would need him. But anyway, they'd have to probably find another taker for Eric Bledsoe, because at least in like a 3-team trade scenario, because the Raptors aren't interested. And it's just going to be a difficult time to find a player a team that would want Bledsoe. Like, he was just so bad this season. You're going to have to give up probably draft capital or one of your young players to get off of him. And you're not going to give up one of your young players because the ceiling of Kyra Lewis, Jackson Hayes, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is too high. You're going to give up a pick to get off the Eric Bledsoe contract. You just are. There's no way that you're going to be able to give him up, value for value in terms of money on a contract. And the teams that would be willing to take him for a pick, I don't know. I mean, you think of the Thunder because that's what they've been, and that's who they are. That's who Sam Presti is in effect right now, is the guy who hoards all the picks. It's just like, my precious, and so you'd have to send something like that. Exactly. You hit it right there. Bledsoe to Oklahoma City. That would probably be one of the better options to get that done. Or you find another team that has clearly decided to tank. Maybe the Trailblazers ultimately tank if they can't hold on to Damian Lillard. And you send Bledsoe there and a pick, and you get it done. And maybe, they send, who knows, Nurkic to Toronto or something like that. You don't involve Adams, or you send Nurkic to New Orleans. I don't know. This is spitballing here, and I don't know how that would all work out, but here's one: Bledsoe, Owundu, and a future first for Lowry, or send Bledsoe in 2 seconds to Orlando for Gary Harris. Harris has fallen off a bit. His contract, he might be an expiring. I haven't prepared and looked that up right now, but and the Pels have a ton of seconds coming up, so they're going to have to get rid of those seconds either way. And so those seconds are going to have to get out. And if you get Gary Harris in exchange and he turns out to be better than what he has been recently and actually worth that money, great. But Harris, I have a bad taste in my mouth thinking about Harris, because that's what the Nuggets wanted to give up for Drew Holiday, and that would have been an awful trade scenario. So I don't think that that's probably what's going to be able to get it done. And then in terms of Bledsoe, Owundu, and a future first for Lowry, Bledsoe, they don't want Bledsoe, so you'd have to include a third team there. And you could send Owundu to OKC because they're hoarding young players as well in terms of the picks. But if you want to pivot young and be able to, if you want to pivot young and you're the Raptors, maybe you keep Adams in a trade. You trade Pascal, keep OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr., who, like I said, has been awesome, and you draft Suggs, and you give up Lowry and actually get something in exchange for him. And that's great. Like you can't just let a guy like that walk with that type of value. And it's kind of the same for New Orleans. Like, if you could do a sign and trade for Lonzo and ship him out elsewhere. There you go, Joe. I appreciate you sending that and dropping that for us. Harris, both an expiring. So maybe it would be worth it if you feel like you can't get a Colin Sexton or somebody else this offseason via trade. But for right now, the way it looks to me, although I love the idea of Kyle Lowry, and if you can keep Steven Adams, if you can keep the number 10 pick, which the number 10 pick and moving that in order to get a Kyle Lowry would be a bit dicey for those of you who are interested, because of, what happened with Bogdanovich in Milwaukee last year. They got a deal done before a deal was able to get done, and then it tore apart, and then Bogdanovich signed in Atlanta. So you just don't want that to happen. It makes the front office look dumb, and they've had a few issues already with that. So probably don't want to do that. Anyway, to continue on the topic, just lastly, you can give up those picks. You can give up young guys to go get a Lowry. But to keep it ideal, you'd hopefully get rid of Steven Adams or Eric Bledsoe, preferably Eric Bledsoe, in a 3-team trade sort of scenario. It's just about finding a young team that will take him on plus a pick, and seeing how that shakes out. Now, if anybody has any ideas in reference to that, drop it. We'll talk about it before the podcast ends. But there's one thing I wanted to address as well before the podcast does end, is the fact that Zion Williamson is not an Olympian. And if you have any takes on that or ideas as to why he wasn't taken, you can drop that in the comments as well. But from what I've gathered, there's the outbreak in Tokyo right now, which is a little scary with COVID. You don't want Zion to get COVID and not be able to train for a couple weeks and all that. Zach LaVine, Jeremy Grant, both in COVID protocol right now. Bradley Beal out now because of COVID. It's just piling up, and who knows what they're going to do in terms of, keeping the athletes safe and stuff like that from COVID in Tokyo. I don't. I mean, I haven't really paid attention to that just because life is a little crazy right now. But there's also the fact that he hurt his hand. There's also the fact that he and BI said they were going to work together this offseason. He probably wants to get in a lot of work with his stepfather and maybe some Pelican staff this offseason and focus on the coming year. We know Didi Louzada was going to do that because he was probably going to be on the Brazilian Olympic team, but that's a little different. Didi and Zion are definitely not in the same sort of value when it comes to the situation there. Also, Kevin Love dropped out because of an injury. So, I mean, I put out the memes and I said the stuff about Zion not being selected. And I thought it was fair. I thought it was funny, and so I would like to see him being an Olympian. That'd be great. Would have loved it for him and Brandon Ingram. There's a ton of positives for both of them to be Olympians. There's a ton of reasons for them to do it. We've seen a bunch of players who went and became Olympians and then came back and clearly made a leap going into the coming season. So it would have been awesome, but also you want to avoid Zion being recruited by other players. So yeah, you don't want that. Nobody wants that, especially any of those teams that are possibly on the downward trajectory, because if they could acquire a Zion, it might change things going forward. Anyway, folks, thank you so much for tuning in today. This will be posted as a podcast tomorrow, and it'll be on all platforms that we're live on right now that you can go back and watch: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. So do that. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave that rate and review. YouTube, you can continue to leave a comment or respond to this tomorrow or right now on Twitter and let us know your thoughts. Tell us what you're thinking in regards to a trade that would acquire Kyle Lowry. And Donald is asking me about Willie Green. That is going to be something we'll talk more about as the hiring process continues. If he actually gets hired here, well, hopefully he'll actually get hired within this week. We'll talk with a Suns reporter. We had an awesome guest on my YouTube channel. If you want to check that out, Donald, it's also on our podcast, Pelicans Plus. Dwayne Rankin, he talks a lot about it. Basically, everything that he said would be what I would echo in terms of why I want Willie Green. So we'll leave that there. If anybody has any questions in the next 30 seconds, drop them and we'll address that. But Donald, I want you to check that out. I don't know if you're on Boot Crew's YouTube or mine, but if you go to mine, it's the just at Elliot Clough right there in the corner, and it's on Apple Podcasts and all that. So go check that out. And if anybody else is wondering what Willie Green would bring to the table, Dwayne Rankin did a freaking phenomenal job. That YouTube video, I believe, has about 1,000 views now. That did the little clip. So thank you for supporting. Thank you for all that. And folks, once again, I am Elliot Clough. Also, go check out bootcrewmedia.com. Do that too before you go. Once again, I am Elliot Clough. Thanks so much for tuning in today. This was Pelicans Plus.